Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me here. So, basically, I've been asked to come here today to talk about the history of Halfbrick and tell the story of Halfbrick Studios and how we got to where we are. What I hope I've put together for you is that story, as well as how we eventually get to the end and talk about our convergence with TV and screen and the likes. There's a big mashup going on at the moment. Sorry, I got a dodgy microphone. So hopefully it'll all make sense. It'll all come together as we go through, and there'll be time for questions at the end. So a little bit about me. I've been at Halfbrick Studios for this is my 5th year. I've been there before Fruit Ninja, before we released Fruit Ninja originally, and started as a junior programmer, and now one of the producers at the company. I'm also a product owner at Halfbrick. So I was just talking to Karen before, and she asked me to sort of talk about the difference between what is a product owner and what is a producer. So essentially I'm both. As a producer, my job is about, which I'll get onto that next slide. My job is very much about that day-to-day scheduling, making sure the team's on track, on task, and very much focused about what it is that we're trying to achieve over a given sprint. So we work using the Scrum software development methodologies. I don't know if you're aware of or know what that is. It's a software development thing. So it's very much about making sure I'm removing impediments from my team and generally making sure that their day is clear for my programmers, artists and designers to work together to produce a cohesive product at the end of the day. As a product owner, it's a very different role. So as product owner of Jetpack Joyride, I maintain the creative vision of the game and the intellectual property. So it goes from just not being just about the game itself and what we're doing for each new update, but it's about where we're going as when we have opportunities that come along to us. For example, we recently had an opportunity where Disney came to us, and we're talking about a possible mashup with, what's his name, Buzz Lightyear, that little guy. And of course we go, wow, that's amazing. It's a great opportunity. At first glance, it seems really too good to be true. But the reality is that, and this is where my job comes in as the product owner, is protecting our game from it being sort of taken away from us. And that's exactly what would happen. Eventually, would be what they really mean by doing a mashup with Buzz Lightyear is that we'd like you to make a Toy Story themed Jetpack Joyride where we own everything and take half the profits, and you guys do all the work, and then we tell you how high to jump and how quick we want it done and what budget we want it done to. And suddenly that's not your game anymore. So that's my job, is to protect that IP from it being taken away from us. It's very dear to us. We're very, very big on Jetpack Joyride. I'll just go back a slide. So this is kind of the games I've worked on since I've been at Halfbrick. Everything from Fruit Ninja, virtually every variation we've done. Fruit Ninja, the HD version, Windows Phone 7, Nokia, Samsung. Then also I was a producer on so that's the original version 1.0 of Fruit Ninja and the version 1.0 of Jetpack Joyride. The executive producer on for Band Stars, which was a team co-developed with one of our partner studios in Adelaide called 6 Foot Kid, part of the People's Republic of Animation. And then a heap of other games along the way that are a bit older and you may or may not have heard of. So Halfbrick itself it was originally established in 2001 by 6 graduate students. Chanel Dio is the last standing of those 6 graduate students and is now the sole owner of the company. And back then they wrote this mission statement, which was to provide an environment where our staff can live successful, fulfilling lives, creating entertainment products that are loved and enjoyed by others worldwide. And we still very much live by that mantra today. For us, the product is the absolute number one thing that we make. And we always try and make that first rather than before we worry about the profit, how it profits and how well it does for the company. It's always about delivering that really great product. So anyway, in the first number of years, we did a number of licensed games, and I'll talk about that shortly, where we worked for hire. And since then, we've grown from 6 people. We're now over 80 people. We have studios. Brisbane is our main office. We have a studio in Sydney. We have a studio in Spain. And we've partially acquired the People's Republic of Animation, which I mentioned before, in Adelaide. The company's getting bigger, and it's grown quite steadily over the last few years since we released Fruit Ninja. So when I joined in 5 or 6 years ago, there was 30 people there, and so that's kind of the indication of the growth. And we also evolved. We evolved from this really small bunch of guys who were making games and just having a laugh and having a crack at making iPhone games eventually, to one of the biggest developers in the world very quickly. And that's evident by games like Fruit Ninja. That I was talking to the cabbie on the way over here today, and I mentioned Fruit Ninja to him, and he knew what it was. So it's a fairly good indication of how well the brand is known. So that's great. So the first about 8 years or so, Halfbrick did work for high jobs. We worked for companies like THQ, Activision, and Nickelodeon, and with the goal of just trying to make games and get employ some guys in the studio, which was where we sort of worked up to about where I started. So it was very much about establishing our name within the industry and a good reputation, that we could deliver a really great product, even though it was working for someone else. It wasn't our game; it was all sorts of different games like these. We worked on all those games there. The first one I worked on was Marvel Superhero Squad. So that was the first license I ever got to work with, was with Marvel. And as you imagine, they're very protective of their intellectual property. Any Wolverine must look like Wolverine, even on a Nintendo DS. But what this did for us was actually surprisingly worked really well for us, because when all of a sudden then the iPhones came along, we'd been working on platforms like Nintendo DS, the Game Boy Advance, and the PlayStation Portable for the last 10 years. Working on a mobile gaming device was our strength. So when iPhone came along, we were absolutely ready for it. And the other part that was really beneficial for the studio was the fact that we've been working with Nintendo DS. Nintendo are very family friendly. By default, these were the kind of games we made. Family friendly, accessible, fun games. Not first person shooters, cutting people's heads off kind of games. These were games that everyone could really love and enjoy. And that was really important, because iPhone and Android devices, the smartphones it's all about this casual, accessible audience. And it's huge. It's everyone. It's not just, it used to be when we were making games back on these days, we used to have to specify who was this game for? Who was our target demographic? Now, and the wrong answer every time was that everyone was the wrong answer. You can't make a game for everyone. That was the common belief. But now that's the absolute truth, is that the games that we make for smartphones in particular are for everyone. And if they're not for everyone, you're probably making the wrong game, I would suggest. So, in what year was it? 2000, pretty sure it was 2009, yeah. 2009, we decided to have a bit of a crack at moving away from working for hire. So, the working for hire was good. We'd got our chops. We'd built up our own tech within the studio to be able to make our games. We were pretty good to go. And we thought we'll have a crack on what we thought was going to be the next big platform, which was, we chose the PlayStation Portable Minis, which was just before iPhone came along. And it went horribly wrong. We made 4 games. One of those games got the PlayStation Portable Minis Game of the Year, and it still failed. Didn't even make its money back. So the other 3 went worse than that. And it was a really interesting experiment. It nearly sent the company to the wall, but it was an interesting experiment nonetheless, where what we found out was that every one of these games, this platform offered too many barriers to the player to be able to spend money at all. So you had to, and a general rule of thumb with adding any kind of barriers to entry, and I think it's true for pretty much any business or anything, is that for every barrier to entry you place in front of a person, that you lose about half of your audience for every barrier. So, say for example, with these games, if you had 1 million possible players that could download the game, well, first they had to, you had to not only have a PlayStation Mini, PlayStation Portable, but you had to have an internet connection on it. You had to have a valid credit card. You had to find the game. You had to be fascinated enough to actually buy the game. Like with 4 or 5 barriers to entry, all of a sudden that 1 million players is down to 20,000 players very quickly. It doesn't take much. So that was a real problem, and I think this is something that Apple did exceptionally well when they came to the market. Was they removed all of that. All your in-app purchases are now literally one or 2 clicks away, and they're very focused in making sure that your credit card's already hooked up. All you need to do is hit buy, and you can make it happen. And if anything, it's quite hard to go the other way and make it. It's harder to not buy things, I think, with Apple, to be honest. Okay, so then basically, essentially, after 10 years, we became an overnight success. We released the version 1.0 of Fruit Ninja on April 20th, 2010. Since then, we've released 28 updates to the game, and that's super important for us. In the mobile game space, if you're not updating your game, people stop caring about it. If you stop caring about it, they stop caring about it. But if you keep updating it, it's quite amazing that how the rejuvenated interest is. Like, it really is. So Fruit Ninja's grown into a globally recognised IP. On iPhone and iPod, the paid version's been downloaded over 20 million times, and the free version will be up to over 300 million times across all SKUs. And there's, I think, 22 different SKUs on last count. So that's all the HD, freeze, paid, Fruit Ninja Connects, the Windows Phone 7, Nokia, Samsungs, every platform under the sun. Everyone's got their own version. So, and what's really interesting about this, though, is that you dream of this kind of success. Like, this is what you aim for, right? But what it uncovered was a whole heap of problems as well. So there was, it was great. We had a lot of money coming into the company. It gave us a lot of stability for secured our future for the next 10 years. But what we didn't expect was the technical problems. When we first released Fruit Ninja 1.0, we released it to iPhone. And we didn't even know if people were going to like the idea or the concept of slicing fruit on a smartphone. And that was kind of what we were trying to find out. That was our question. That was the question we posed to the world. Is it fun to slice fruit on a phone? And it turned out they really do like that idea, okay? But what we weren't prepared for was our initial goal was to get 100,000 downloads for Fruit Ninja. Nowhere near this kind of scale. And so the problems that we faced were, all of a sudden, the whole Android community up in arms that Fruit Ninja wasn't available on Android. But our engine didn't support Android. People on Windows phones and every different smartphone in the world, they all wanted Fruit Ninja on their phones. But we didn't have the tech for it. We had 30 people in the studio. Fruit Ninja was made by 3 people in 7 weeks originally. We were clearly not ready for this kind of success. We found it was great. We got the answer that we're after, but what we didn't consider was, oh shit, this is a really big problem. And they were huge problems. And it took us actually about the next 2 years to resolve them, which was being able to not only now get our games on all platforms, but release updates simultaneously. Not just, we had this point where we were updating iOS, and then 2 months later, the Android would get the same update. It's too long. It's got to be the same day. And that's what people expect. And that's how you have to treat your market. You have to treat everyone equally and fairly. And on the surface, it just seems like you're not doing that. The reality is there's so much tech on the back end that needs to be right for you to be able to do that. So it opened up a bit of a can of worms for us, that's for sure. Just a few of the Halfbrick Day titles. So this was funny, actually. This used to be my slide of this one. I'll do a few of these talks. And it used to be Fruit Ninja HD, Puss in Boots, Rascals, all the different Fruit Ninja variants, Jetpack, Monster Dash, and Age of Zombies. But we've added a few new games. So we've now got 5 new titles and a whole heap of other new games coming along as well. Bears vs. Art, Fish Out of Water, Yes Chef, and Burzle Fever are 2 games that we've recently just published. And Bears vs. Art is another game that we've recently just released, which is really good. So I also wanted to talk about how we come up with our ideas and how we come up with different games and how do you come up with Fruit Ninja, right? Very simply, our lead designer at Halfbrick, Luke Muscat, he's a bit of a freak to start with, but he sat up one night and watched an infomercial of some guy with a sharp knife throwing fruit in the air, slicing it, and from that, Fruit Ninja was kind of born. But we also have this period where we allow everyone in the studio to pitch their ideas to the company, and we call it Halfbrick Fridays. Because it used to be once every second Friday we'd stop what we're working on and spend a day working on these other projects, these ideas that we have, and we'd pitch them to the company and organically form teams around. I like that idea. I'm going to go and work on it. And so what that picture there is actually the original screenshot of the prototype that we made for Fruit Ninja, made in Flash. It's very simple, and even then, not many of us in the studio really saw or believed that this was going to be something that people liked. It was a PC Flash game, so you moving a mouse around, and you just didn't quite have that feel until we put it on a device. So there's always that bit where even though that game was made and the general concept was there, it was still required a good stretch of the imagination that how this was going to work and why people would care about it. And fortunately, we have people with that kind of creative vision in the studio. And I'd like to say it was me, but it wasn't. Yeah, I thought it was crazy, personally. But what it is, this Halfbrick Fridays initiative is very much about making sure that everyone in the studio, we think that everyone we hire has a game in them, at least one, if not multiple games in them. And generally, if people don't have it, we wonder why they're there with us. You have to be there and you have to be passionate about making video games. And generally, everyone does have at least one or two good games ideas in them, or at least a number of suggestions of games, how they could make other games better. And so, what we find with this is that not only is it a really great break from working on the projects that we're working on in production, which will take anywhere from 3 to 12 months, this is just a great break and being creative again, working on something fresh and new and interesting. And the reality is, of most of them will never see the light of day. These games, some do. Some we always learn something from every project we make. It may be a certain mechanic or a certain new way we've drawn the interface, or a new art style, or we've uncovered a new talent. There's always something good that comes out of every project, just not necessarily a shippable game. As much as we try to, it just doesn't work quite that way sometimes. And I guess down the bottom, what happens to these projects? What happens to them is that we keep them internally in the studio. They're available for everyone to play. Whenever a game team comes off a project, they're available. They're able to take one of those games into production, and if they think it's viable. But they're there. They don't go away. It's just one of those things, like the really great games that tend to be fairly obvious what will and won't work. Okay, product over profit. Okay, great. So this screen is just about, I think, something I mentioned before, about making sure where we aim the studio itself and general philosophies at work of, it's always about, it's just something that Apple did really well. When they come along, is that they really focused on the product first, and there's all, that really crazy level of attention to detail. And it's something that we just love. We love it. We think it's the same, and I think you sort of see that in games like Jetpack Joyride in particular, is that it's just a small little attention items that are of attention to detail that people appreciate and like, and it resonates with them. It shows that we care beyond just trying to make a dollar, I guess. So we have a few points there where all Halfbrick games have to hit a high internally set bar, and we're always trying to endeavouring to exceed that bar and not just meet it. So every game we're trying to be better than the last game, and I think you sort of see that particularly visually through our sort of history of games. Games are sharp, clean, elegant, and simple. We've got that stuff, that mantra printed up on our walls. Just sharp, clean, elegant, simple. It's what they're about. It should be immediate to the player how to play the game without a really in-depth tutorial. It's something we do. Lots of game developers put tutorials in the game, and that's fine. But one of my favourite things about Fruit Ninja, and one of the favourite stories I'll tell you, is our lead designer. One day we're doing this bus stop testing down at Kelvin Grove. We take Fruit Ninja, really early builds. We take it down to a local bus stop where all the uni students are, and looking for anyone who's playing on their smartphone. And you go, excuse me, would you mind playing this one? And the general rule of thumb is with any kind of testing is that you just give them the game, you don't say anything. And what we found was that every person in the game would tap the screen. They'd tap away, and they'd hand it back to you, go, mate, your game's broken, it's not working, because you have to slice to get into Fruit Ninja. And slicing was a whole new game mechanic. I was like, oh, and I'm there, and every person, we put it in front of about 10, 12 people, and every person did exactly the same thing. They were tapping away, your game's broken, mate, sorry. And we're not allowed to tell them, no, just slice, they have to work it out. If they can't work it out, we need to sort something out. So I go back to the studio and talk to the lead designer about it. I said, oh, dude, I think we need a tutorial. And he solved it by this little animation. So now what happens if you tap the screen more than 3 times, this little finger slicing animation plays. And that's the tutorial. Brilliant. I love that. I just think it's really clever. Very elegant and simple solution. Elegant and simple, right? So some design considerations. That picture there, it's our proudest moment, that picture. It's a design award from Apple. Not many people get them, and we got that for Jetpack Joyride. So we're very happy with that. But just a whole lot of points about how we got that was about keeping it really simple, fun, accessible, engaging. It feels awesome. Every button press should feel awesome. It's super important to us. Everything you do is about it feeling great. Like slicing fruit could feel really ordinary, but we had this a term when we were developing Fruit Ninja was about fruit porn, that it should feel juicy and gooey and sexy, and it should feel a bit pornographic. And you feel it, right? It's about feel and that tactile feeling. Like really, the reality is that you're just moving your finger around on a piece of glass. That's all you're doing. And our job is to make it feel like so much more than that. And so, I really like that. And I think the bottom point is probably the most important one, is making games that people immediately understand. They don't master them immediately, but they understand what it's about, and they get it, and it gets you interested in it. Who's this game for? Yeah, I'm not going to dwell too much on this one. This is just about making sure you know who your audience is for, and who your product's for, who's playing it. For me, I got lots of nephews and nieces, and I love that they play Jetpack Joyride. They play it a lot. They don't play it because of me. They play it because they love it. They're very proud that I'm their uncle. They love wearing that around and telling everyone about that. But it's really interesting. It reminds me of who's playing, and it's generally kids, but it's also all sorts of people. Popping on Twitter, you see who posts on Twitter about Jetpack Joyride, and it's surprisingly a lot of women. I never knew that. I never expected that to be the case, but it's true. And so what you do, you have to take that in consideration. When you're making the next update, who is this for? Can we put a female character in? What can we do to keep people interested and engaged and happy and still tweeting and talking about it? It's it's not an easy thing to do. I'm just sort of just whizzing through a few here because there's a real big point I want to get to, which is our convergence over to screen shortly, and I want to make sure I've got time for it. So paid or free, this was another really interesting one. So we had Jetpack out for a while. It was paid, and up until that point, it was 99-cent game, and we'd had around 1 million sales of the game. So it made us money, really profitable already. And then one Christmas we thought, okay, what happens if we turn this free? Will we because Jetpack also had in-app purchases in the game. So will it make more money from appealing to a bigger audience with only in-app purchases, or will it make more money being paid with less audience? And man, it was quite amazing. So in 6 months we had an extra 24 million installs. Today it's about an extra 140 million installs. About 2 years later, it's just gone crazy, and it made a lot more money. It's done exceptionally well since we've gone free. It was just, the rule of thumb is that for every paid user, you'd normally get about 10 free users who'll download your game. It's that barrier to entry. And really interesting how my rule of thumb was you lose about half your audience. The reality is we're losing about 10 times our audience by removing that 99-cent barrier. There's a whole big conversation about a race to the bottom and everything being free and all that sort of stuff, but that's a different conversation. For us, this was a really great comparison and a really good test to do. Okay, finally. So this is a bit that's going to take a few minutes. And it's about evolving our games from just being games into intellectual properties. So this is where my job as product owner comes in a little bit more. And I just wanted to go through a few different trailers of where we started with our trailers, what we thought was a good trailer to start with, and where we're at now. So I'll just get you to play the Fruit Ninja trailer. They're all good fun.
Now start just boogieing down.
The banana was our lead programmer on that. I love telling everyone that. But it goes, yeah, I think it just shows as filmmakers, we're pretty good game developers. That one. So that's where we started, right? That was before we actually released Fruit Ninja. So budget was super tight. It was literally a couple of guys with a handy cam down in the park and crazy fruit suits and some fruit from the local fruit shop, and just been a bit silly and had a bit of fun with it. But I think it nicely reflected who Halfbrick were at the time and what the game was about. You know, people got it, and it helped. You know, like the views on that would be through the roof, over 10 million views, I'm sure. Anyway, so where we're at now, though, with Jetpack Joyride in particular, is I'd just like to go through a few of these. So the first one's the gadgets. So now we're sort of more. So Jetpack Joyride is a game about Barry Steakfries and he's breaking into the scientist's secret lab. So we'll just start there. And so so this one's definitely like the first one is gadgets and how they affect the gameplay. So as you see, they're starting to evolve into something a little bit more complex. But the beauty of these is that it's also starting to tell a story about scientists where there really is no story to tell. The scientists in Jetpack Joyride really just wander around and get killed by Barry Steakfries as their hapless victims in his way to trying to ride his jetpack to freedom. And so just going to Flash. So again, this is another kind of a gadget, and we did this whole series of gadgets. And this is actually involving every Halfbrick employee.
How awesome is your dog? Can he fetch? Good boy. Can he smash piggy banks? Oh. Can he collect cash? Not quite. Can your dog fly a jetpack? Smash through walls? Ride a giant mechanical fire-breathing dragon? Flash can! Introducing Flash!
That was really fun. Like we went around everyone's homes and at work anyone had a dog, we come to your place to film your dog. Throwing money at it. So again, okay. So the next one is Sam. So Sam is something that happened at the end of Christmas this year, and so Sam is the acronym for the Strong Arm Machine, which is a new bit of whole new sort of beast we placed into Jetpack recently. Just want to show that one. Okay, so this is kind of what we've gotten to so far gameplay-wise, and yeah, it's just a really interesting thing now. What's happening with video games and this convergence over to screen is it doesn't always work. I guess is the simple thing. Like we did a lot of stuff with Fruit Ninja, and we really had to work hard to make things work with. And like we're looking at an animated TV series for a while, and I'm not sure if that's still in the works or not, but it was one of those ones, there are no characters in Fruit Ninja, essentially. It's fruit and your finger, so to try and create a world around that is very difficult. Whereas Jetpack had a lot to play with. It had all these scientists, had a great really strong lead character with Barry Steakfries. It had all these different elements of the game coming in, Flash and Sam and whatnot. And so we were able to really start building things up, and really, so recently we've really started to explore that universe in a lot more depth. So the next one is one called The Story of Barry Steakfries, and this was where we've recently released an update to another game called Age of Zombies, which Barry Steakfries is also in, and we decided to try and tell the whole story, because he's actually in 3 different games. He's in Age of Zombies, Monster Dash, and Jetpack Joyride. But when we made the games, we never really made it in mind of that there was any actual overall story arc. It was just we made 3 different games. So this kind of tries to bring it together a little bit. I'll show that one.
This is Barry Steakfries. After failing to revive dwindling gramophone sales, Barry ventured into the lab of legitimate research. Uncovering the newest breakthrough in aviation technologies, Barry liberated the world's greatest jetpacks from the scientists who would use them only for evil. Along the way, he also rode a robot dragon and a bird that shoots money, which was awesome and super fun. Landing in a world with monsters, Barry laced up and ran like the wind to his next destination. Now, the mild-mannered gramophone salesman turned dragon-riding, monster-blasting, jetpack-based hero is ready to face a challenge that will echo through the ages. This is Age of Zombies.
We do have a lot of fun with the VO in the game, that's for sure, and all those trailers. Yeah, so we're trying to sort of tie things together a little bit there and give some overall context as to what came first. And even though Jetpack Joyride was the most recent game released in the history of Barry Steakfries, it was actually the first story, apparently. Go figure. Anyway, and our most recent thing we've been looking at is then other opportunities of where we can do a little bit more interesting work, I guess, of where else can we take the story of Barry Steakfries. And this Sleeves rock opera is something we've recently worked with the 6 Foot Kid, the People's Republic of Animation, and an Australian band called The Beards, who have done this little tune for us. Actually, it's not released under the name The Beards, though, because it's not a song about beards. So...
I need some new shirt sleeves, please. I need some new shirt sleeves, please. I need some new shirt sleeves. I ripped my shirt. I don't wanna be a jerk, but I gotta go to work. And I need some new shirt sleeves. I need some new shirt sleeves. You did a great job with these. You did a great job with these. The job you did with these deserves some champagne. I like to proclaim that you're the best in the game. I'm gonna spread your name. Oh no, I've done it again. You charge such reasonable fees. You charge such reasonable fees. Your fees are reasonable. You charge a great price. You've already fixed them twice. Now it's about to be thrice. That champagne on ice was shirt rippingly nice. I've got a shirt ripping disease. I've got a shirt ripping disease. I've got a disease, yeah, I think I'm unwell. You can probably tell that I often feel compelled to get excited and to yell and rip my shirt material. And now I need some new shirt sleeves still. I need some new shirt sleeves still. I need some sleeves still, and your number one client. So if you wouldn't mind, would you be so kind as to fix these sleeves of mine, because I'm nearly out of time. Thanks.
So a slightly new direction that we're going with our music videos, I guess. And the general idea with this is that this is going into the game. So this is not just something we're putting up on YouTube and expecting people to find. We're embedding it into the game, and when people watch it, we actually give the player Barry's full sleeved up jacket, so that's been stitched up as just a free costume that they can equip in the game. So again, just a nice way of sort of bringing a little bit more story and background about Barry and his childhood obsession with ripping his shirt sleeves, and that's why he's got ripped sleeves. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it doesn't really have to make a lot of sense, but it's just a lot of fun, and that's kind of the main point with where we're going with this stuff. And it's always, for us, I guess all the things that we're doing with this little convergence sort of thing we're doing is about having fun with the player and trying to just shed a little bit of interesting thought on what the background of this world is and what this universe is about, who the scientists are, what makes them tick, what makes Barry get out of bed in the morning, that kind of stuff, and just generally, like I say, just generally having a bit of fun with it, and not getting too serious about it all, I guess. And it's definitely about, our goal is to establish Jetpack as an endearing and internationally recognised intellectual property, and it is. Jetpack's a really strong brand. These days, where everyone used to talk about Fruit Ninja, most people will talk to me about Jetpack these days. They associate Halfbrick with Jetpack more so than Fruit Ninja, which is quite amazing. Jetpack's definitely a much more involved game. It's more of a gamer's game as well than Fruit Ninja. Fruit Ninja is very casual. Jetpack's got a lot more depth to it. Not a huge amount, but more depth to it. And that definitely resonates with a lot more people. Barry and Beards. So, like I said, this is definitely about telling a story where there has never been a story. So this has kind of been a really interesting little thing. Investigating Jetpack Universe. I think I've really sort of spoken about most of these points. It's definitely just reminding the player about what a fun world it is to play in Jetpack Joyride, and it definitely seems to be working quite well. where this goes in the future is anyone's guess at the moment. It's for us, it's been about putting it out there to see what kind of engagement that we get with players. A lot of our trailers, like that Sam trailer, which was about 2 or 3 trailers back, that's I think about 5.5 million views all of a sudden, and that just went from nothing. It was really just about an update that we did, and it's quite amazing the traction that we get with behind the Halfbrick brand. So that was really about what I had to talk to about today. I think it might be a little bit early, but I'm more than happy to hang around and answer any questions that anyone may or may not have. Yeah. Oops. Oh, I buggered that up. Thank you.